great space station hung in the darkness like a silver jewel. It was bigger than most moons, with towers that stretched for miles and docking bays that could hold entire fleets. This was the Galactic Council station, where the most important beings in the galaxy came to make decisions that affected billions of worlds. Today was like any other day. The station buzzed with activity as ships from across the galaxy arrived and departed. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, smooth hulls that gleamed like mirrors, energy shields that sparkled with rainbow colors, and engines that hummed with perfect efficiency. The Zephyrian ships looked like floating crystals, their surfaces catching the light of nearby stars. The hegemony vessels were massive and golden, built like floating cities. The insectoid hive ships moved in perfect formation, their black hulls covered in geometric patterns. In the main council chamber, representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned seats. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a view of space above. Each delegate had their own platform that could adjust to their species' needs, different gravity, atmosphere, and lighting. The air itself was filtered and divided into sections so that beings who breathed methane could sit next to those who needed pure oxygen. Ambassador Zeltar of the Hegemony called the session to order. He was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the chamber's light. His voice carried across the room without amplification, a gift of his species. Today we discuss the trade routes through the spiral arm, Zeltar announced. The Merchant Guild has requested exclusive rights to 3 systems, while the Mining Consortium wishes to expand their operations to... The lights in the chamber suddenly flashed red. A loud alarm began to sound, echoing off the walls. Every delegate looked up in surprise. The alarm had not sounded in over 200 years. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Councillor Vexhai, her tentacles writhing with irritation. She represented the aquatic depths people, and her tank of blue-green water began to bubble with her agitation. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the space around the station, marked with green dots for friendly ships and red dots for unknowns. There were 7 red dots approaching fast. "Unknown vessels detected," announced the station's artificial intelligence. Its voice was calm and pleasant, designed to never cause panic. "They are not responding to standard identification protocols. Security alert level yellow." The delegates began to murmur among themselves. Unknown ships were not uncommon, but they usually announced themselves long before reaching the station. These ships had appeared suddenly, as if they had jumped out of hyperspace much closer than safety regulations allowed. "Magnify the display," ordered Zeltar. "Let us see these visitors." The hologram zoomed in on the approaching ships, and a collective gasp went up from the assembled delegates. These were not the sleek, beautiful vessels they were used to seeing. The ships looked like they had been through a war. The largest ship had a hull that was patched with different colored metals. Sections of its armor were missing entirely, replaced with what looked like crude welding work. Its engines glowed an angry red instead of the usual blue or white, and black smoke trailed behind it. The other ships were in similar condition. Some had entire sections that looked like they had been torn away and rebuilt with scrap metal. "By the 7 suns," whispered Delegate Quilren, his feathers ruffling with shock. "What happened to them?" "Perhaps they were attacked by pirates," suggested another delegate. "No pirate would leave ships in such condition," said Councillor Vexahai. "They would either destroy them completely or capture them intact." The ships continued their approach, moving in a formation that spoke of military training despite their battered appearance. They held position just outside the station's defensive perimeter, neither advancing nor retreating. "Station control to unknown vessels," came a transmission from the station's communication center. "Identify yourselves and state your business. You are approaching a restricted area." For a moment there was only static. Then a voice crackled through the speakers, heavy with interference. "Galactic Council Station. This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We request permission to dock. We have diplomatic business to discuss." The delegates looked at each other in confusion. None of them had heard of the Terran Defense Force. The name meant nothing to any species represented in the council. "Computer, search all databases for information on Terran Defense Force and Terrans," Zeltar commanded. Searching, no results found in diplomatic, military, or species databases. The term Terran appears to be derived from Terra, an ancient word meaning earth or ground in several extinct languages. "Admiral Chen," Zeltar spoke into the communication system, "we have no record of your species or your military organization. Please transmit your credentials and identification codes. Another burst of static, then the voice returned. It sounded tired but determined. We don't have credentials in your system because we've never been here before. We're here to request membership in the Galactic Council. We've been busy for the last 50 years. We just finished a war. This caused an uproar in the chamber. Several delegates began speaking at once, their voices mixing into a cacophony of different languages and sounds. A war? What war? How could a species fight a war for 50 years without the Council knowing about it? Zeltar raised his hand for silence. Admiral Chen, if you are seeking membership, you must follow proper protocols. First contact procedures require... With respect, Ambassador, the voice interrupted. We don't have time for full protocols. Our ships are barely holding together, our crews are exhausted, and we've been fighting for survival for half a century. We've earned our place here. The audacity of the statement shocked the delegates into silence. Earned their place? By whose judgment? The Galactic Council had strict requirements for membership: advanced technology, peaceful intentions, and the recommendation of at least 3 existing members. Security, what is your assessment? Zeltar asked quietly. The ships are heavily armed, but their weapons appear to be of mixed origin, came the reply. Some components match Devourer technology, others are unknown. They pose a potential threat, but their condition suggests they are not an invasion force. At the mention of Devourer technology, several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Devourers were a legend, a nightmare from the outer rim of the galaxy, machine beings that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but empty worlds. They had been quiet for decades, and most species preferred to believe they were just stories told to frighten children. Did he say Devourer technology? Whispered Delegate Mordic, his rocky skin taking on a grayish hue of fear. Admiral Chen, Zeltar said carefully, you mentioned the Devourers. This is concerning. Please explain. The response took longer this time. When it came, the voice sounded even more tired than before. That's what we need to talk about, Ambassador. The Devourers found us 50 years ago. They tried to wipe us out like they've done to so many others, but we didn't let them. We fought back, we won. The chamber erupted in chaos. Won against the Devourers? It was impossible. The Devourers were a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. They had destroyed entire sectors of space before disappearing back into the void. Zeltar struggled to restore order. When the noise finally died down, he spoke again. Admiral Chen, these are extraordinary claims. If you are truly who you say you are, then we must speak immediately. Prepare for emergency docking procedures. Base 7 is being cleared for your arrival. Thank you, Ambassador. We'll try not to leak too much fuel on your nice clean deck. As the battered human ship slowly approached the docking bay, every delegate in the chamber watched in stunned silence. If these beings were telling the truth, then everything about galactic politics was about to change. The docking bay was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The floor was made of some kind of white metal that seemed to glow from within. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds could have formed near the top. Mechanical arms as big as buildings moved with perfect precision, guiding ships into their berths. Everything was clean, efficient, and beautiful. Admiral Sarah Chen stepped off her ship onto the pristine deck and tried not to wince. Behind her, her crew was doing their best to hide the worst of the damage. But there was no hiding the scorch. Marks on the hull, the patches welded over holes, or the way their engines coughed and sputtered before finally going quiet. Chen was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but she carried herself like someone who had seen the worst the universe could offer and refused to break. Her uniform was patched and faded, but it was clean and pressed. Behind her walked 6 other humans, her senior staff. They all had the same look, worn down but unbroken, like old tools that had been used hard but were still sharp. Waiting for what? Them was Ambassador Zeltar and a small group of other beings. Chen had seen pictures of aliens before, found in old databases from scout ships, but seeing them in person was different. Zeltar was tall and elegant, his blue skin perfect and unmarked. Next to him stood a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal, its body refracting the light of the bay into rainbow patterns. Another being floated in a small tank of water, tentacles moving gracefully as it watched the humans approach. Between the humans and the alien delegation was a shimmering wall of energy, a containment field. Standard protocol for first contact. Chen knew, but it still felt insulting after everything they had been through. Admiral Chen, Zeltar said, his voice somehow carrying clearly through the energy field. I am Ambassador Zeltar of the Hegemony, current chairman of the Galactic Council. These are my colleagues, Counselor Crystallis of the Prism Worlds and Counselor Vexahai of the Depths People. Honored to meet you, Chen replied, giving a slight bow. Her crew did the same. I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the Terran Defense Force. These are my officers. Terran Defense Force, repeated Crystallis, her voice sounding like wind chimes. We have searched our databases extensively, Admiral. There is no record of your species or your military organization. That's because we've never been here before, Chen said simply. 50 years ago, we didn't even know you existed. We were still figuring out how to travel between stars when they found us. They? Asked Vexhai, her tentacles curling with interest. The Devourers. The aliens exchanged looks. Chen could see the fear in their eyes, even across species barriers. Good. At least they understood what that name meant. Admiral, Zeltar said carefully, the Devourers are a serious matter. They have been quiet for many years. Most of the galaxy believes they have withdrawn to the outer regions. Chen laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Withdrawn? No, Ambassador, they've been busy. They found our world 50 years ago and decided we looked tasty. They brought a fleet of 1,000 ships to harvest us. 1,000 ships, whispered Crystallis. That is larger than most of our combined fleets. Yeah, we figured that out pretty quick, Chen said. They destroyed our orbital platforms in the first hour. Our moon colony was gone by the end of the day. We had maybe 200 ships total, and most of those were cargo haulers and mining barges, not exactly military grade. Then how, Vexhai began, then stopped herself. How did we survive? Chen finished. That's a good question. We asked ourselves that a lot in the early days. The answer is, we shouldn't have. By every reasonable calculation, we should have been wiped out in a week. She gestured to her officers. Commander Rodriguez here was a cargo pilot. Lieutenant Kim worked on a mining station. Major Thompson was a planetary defense coordinator, but his biggest worry before the war was drunk teenagers vandalizing satellites. None of us were prepared for this. But you survived, Zeltar observed. We more than survived. We won. Chen's voice was steady, matter of fact. It took 50 years, but we won. The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Crystallis spoke. Admiral, forgive me, but this is difficult to believe. The Devourers have destroyed entire sectors. They consume technology, absorb it, make it part of themselves. They are not an enemy that can be defeated by conventional means. You're right, Chen agreed. Conventional means don't work against them. We learned that the hard way. In the first year of the war, we lost 80% of our remaining ships trying to fight them like a normal enemy. Formation attacks, coordinated strikes, all the standard military doctrine. It was useless. Then how? Pressed Vexhai. Chen was quiet for a moment, looking at her battered ship through the bay's transparent walls. We learned to be something they couldn't absorb, something they couldn't understand or predict. We learned to be desperate. She turned back to the aliens. You want to know how we beat them? We cheated. We broke every rule of civilized warfare. We used tactics that no sane military would ever consider. We turned our weakness into strength. Explain, Zeltar said, leaning forward despite himself. The Devourers are machines. They think like machines. They calculate probabilities, analyze patterns, adapt to strategies. But they couldn't adapt to chaos. They couldn't understand why we would ram a damaged ship into their formations instead of trying to save it. They couldn't process why we would blow up our own ships to take them down with us. Chen's voice grew harder. They expected us to fight for our ships, for our bases, for our strategic positions. Instead, we fought for every human life. Every civilian evacuation gave us more time. Every ship we sacrificed bought us something they couldn't calculate. Hope. You speak of sacrifice, Crystallis noted. How many did you lose? Too many. Chen's voice went quiet. We started with 8 billion people across 12 worlds and hundreds of stations. By the end of the war, we had maybe 2 billion left, scattered across the galaxy in hidden bases and refugee fleets. The numbers hung in the air like a physical weight. The aliens looked at each other, trying to comprehend that level of loss. But the survivors, Chen continued, every single one of them was a fighter. Our children grew up knowing how to repair damaged systems and jury-rig weapons from spare parts. Our elderly became experts at finding weaknesses in Devourer technology. Every human became part of the war effort. And you actually defeated them? Zeltar asked. 3 months ago, we cornered their main fleet at a place we called Titan's Gate. It was their primary construction facility, where they were building the ships that would have spread them across the entire galaxy. Chen smiled, and for a moment, the exhaustion left her face. We hit them with everything we had left. 700 ships, most of them held together with prayers and spare parts. 700 ships against the Devourers, murmured Vexhai. It sounds impossible. It was impossible, Chen agreed. That's why it worked. They couldn't calculate for impossible. When we used our own ships as guided missiles, when we turned our life support systems into explosive devices, when we manually piloted damaged fighters into their command vessels, they couldn't adapt fast enough. She looked at each of the aliens in turn. When the battle was over, their construction facility was destroyed. Their fleet was scattered. Their ability to reproduce and expand was broken. It will take them centuries to recover if they ever do. And that is why you come to us now, Zeltar said slowly. That's right. 50 years ago, we were just another species trying to reach the stars. Now we're the ones who stopped the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. We've earned our place at this table. Chen stepped closer to the energy field separating them. We're not asking for charity, Ambassador. We're not begging for protection. We're offering membership to the species that just saved every civilization in this galaxy from extinction. The question is whether you're smart enough to accept. The aliens stared at this small, battle-scarred human who spoke with such quiet confidence. Her ship was patched and battered. Her uniform was faded and her crew looked like they hadn't slept in months. But she had just claimed something that sounded like pure fantasy, that her people had defeated the unconquerable Devourers. Admiral Chen, Zeltar said finally, if what you say is true, then we have much to discuss, but such claims require proof. Chen nodded. I understand. We brought proof. Battle recordings, captured technology, verified sensor data from the final engagement. Everything you need to confirm what we've told you. She paused, then added with a slight smile. Plus, our ships might look like junk, but they're still here. After 50 years of fighting the Devourers, that's proof enough, for most people. The main conference room of the Galactic Council was built to impress. The table was carved from a single piece of dark stone that seemed to absorb light, and around it sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Today, they were all focused on a small human woman who looked like she hadn't slept in years. Admiral Chen stood at one end of the table, her hands clasped behind her back. She had been talking for an hour, and every word had painted a picture that none of the aliens wanted to believe. Behind her, a holographic display showed star charts and battle data that her officers had uploaded from their damaged ships. When the Devourers first arrived at Earth, Chen continued, we thought they were just another alien species. First contact protocols, diplomatic channels, the whole procedure. We sent our best ambassadors and linguists to communicate with them. Icho paused, looking out the conference room's massive windows at the pristine ships docked around the station. They sent back a message. Not words. They don't use language like we do. They sent back pieces of our ambassadors, converted into machine parts. Several of the delegates shifted uncomfortably. Counselor Mordak, whose rocky skin had turned an unhealthy gray color, spoke up. Admiral, we have heard stories of the Devourers for centuries. Most of us believed they were myths, warnings told to keep species from venturing too far into the outer regions. They're not myths, Chen said firmly. They're very real, and they've been systematically working their way toward the galactic core for longer than you realize. How do you think they got so good at what they do? Practice. She touched a control on the holographic display and new images appeared. Star charts showing dozens of systems, each one marked with a red symbol. These are the civilizations they destroyed before they found us. 23 different species, gone. Not conquered, not enslaved, completely converted into raw materials for their fleet. Some of these worlds had been inhabited for thousands of years. Ambassador Zeltar leaned forward, studying the display. These systems, some of them were recorded as lost to natural disasters or communications failure in our databases. Because that's what it looked like from the outside, Chen explained. The Devourers are efficient. They strip a world of everything useful, metal, organic compounds, even the atmosphere, and leave behind what looks like a natural disaster. Solar flares, asteroid impacts, whatever explanation makes sense. Delegate Quilren, his feathers now completely flattened against his body, in distress asked, how do you know all this? Because we captured some of their data cores during the war. It took us 30 years to figure out how to read them, but we did. They keep records, detailed ones. Every species they've consumed, Every technique they've perfected, every bit of technology they've absorbed. Chen's voice grew harder. Do you want to know what they called us? Resource Cluster 847. That's it. Not humans, not Earth, just another collection of materials to be processed. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Finally, Counselor Vexhai spoke, her tentacles moving in agitated patterns. Admiral, you said this war lasted 50 years. Please, tell us how it began. Chen nodded and moved to another section of the display. Earth appeared, blue and green and beautiful, surrounded by the basic infrastructure of a young spacefaring civilization. 51 years ago, we had just established our first permanent colonies on Mars and Europa. We had maybe 40 ships, capable of interplanetary travel, mostly cargo haulers and science vessels. Our military consisted of a few patrol craft designed to deal with asteroids and space debris. She gestured, and the display changed to show a massive fleet approaching Earth's solar system. The alien ships were unlike anything the Council members had seen, dark, organic-looking vessels that seemed to flow and shift even as they moved through space. The Devourer fleet arrived without warning. 1,307 ships, ranging from fighters the size of shuttles to city-sized dreadnoughts. Their technology was incredible. Energy weapons that could cut through our best armor like paper, shields that absorbed everything we could throw at them. What did you do? Asked Crystallis, her crystalline body refracting the light from the display. We ran, Chen said simply. What else could we do? Our entire home defense fleet engaged them over Earth. 23 ships against more than 1,000. The battle lasted 17 minutes. The display showed a brief, violent engagement in Earth's orbit. Flashes of weapons fire, explosions, debris. We lost 21 ships. The 2 survivors were only because they were already running when the shooting started. Captain Martinez of the cargo ship Golden Horizon and Commander Park of the science vessel Discovery. They managed to get word to our outer colonies. Chen's voice remained steady, professional, but the aliens could hear the pain underneath. By the time the sun set on that day, Earth's orbital infrastructure was gone. Our moon bases were being dismantled. The Devourers had begun the process of harvesting our homeworld. But surely your people on the planet, Zeltar began. We're trapped, Chen finished. The Devourers didn't attack the surface immediately. They started with the oceans, extracting minerals, harvesting organic compounds. Billions of people watched from the ground as their world was slowly consumed above their heads. She touched the display again, showing evacuation ships fleeing a dying world. The colonies on Mars and Europa had maybe 600,000 people total. Small mining operations, research stations, not military installations. But they had ships, mining, barges, transport shuttles, anything that could carry people away from the solar system. So you evacuated, observed Mordak. We tried. But the Devourers were efficient. They had scout ships tracking every vessel that left Earth's system. Most of the evacuation ships were caught and processed. Only about 50 ships made it to deep space, carrying maybe 30,000 people total. Chen paused, looking at the faces around the table. That was our entire civilization. 30,000 refugees scattered across a dozen different ships, most of them never designed for long-term space travel. No home base, no manufacturing capacity, no military assets. Just people who were very, very angry. 30,000 against an entire Devourer fleet, murmured Vexhai. It seems hopeless. It was hopeless, Chen agreed. That's why we had to get creative. When you have no chance of winning a fair fight, you don't fight fair. She changed the display again, showing a small human ship approaching a much larger Devourer vessel. This was our first victory. Commander Park of the Discovery realized that the Devourers absorbed technology by consuming it, breaking it down, and incorporating useful parts into their own systems. So he loaded his science ship with every volatile chemical and unstable reactor core the refugees could find, then rammed it into the side of a Devourer mothership. The display showed a brilliant explosion that consumed both vessels. The Devourers had never encountered a species willing to destroy their own technology, to deny it to the enemy. Park's sacrifice took out their primary processing ship and gave the other refugee vessels time to escape. More importantly, it gave us an idea. Chen smiled for the first time since beginning her story, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. If they wanted to absorb our technology, we'd give them technology they couldn't handle. We started building ships specifically designed to be weapons of suicide, reactors that would overload when tampered with, computer systems that would trigger explosive decompression if accessed incorrectly, hull plating that was actually compressed antimatter. Antimatter? Zeltar looked shocked. That's incredibly dangerous. Everything we did was incredibly dangerous, Chen replied. We were fighting for the survival of our species. Safety regulations become less important when the alternative is extinction. She gestured to another part of the display, showing increasingly bizarre human ship designs. Over the years, our ships got weirder and weirder. We'd take a Devourer engine and hook it up to human computers, then power the whole thing with a reactor we'd stolen from another battle. Nothing matched. Nothing was standardized, but it worked. This explains the condition of your vessels, Crystallis observed. Every ship in our fleet is unique, Chen confirmed. Built from scrap, powered by determination, and held together by the skill of crews who learn to make miracles out of spare parts. They're ugly, but they've survived 50 years of fighting an enemy that destroyed entire sectors. She looked around the table at the assembled delegates. Which brings us to why we're here. 3 months ago, we finally tracked down the main Devourer fleet, their construction facility, their command ships, their ability to reproduce and expand. We hit them with everything we had left. And you won, Zeltar said, still sounding like he couldn't quite believe it. We won, Chen confirmed. It cost us almost half our remaining ships and 10,000 lives, but we won. The Devourer threat to the galaxy is broken. They might recover someday, but not in our lifetimes. She stood straighter, looking every delegate in the eye. So now we come to you. Not as refugees begging for help, but as the species that saved the galaxy from its greatest threat. We've earned our place here. Admiral Chen touched the holographic display, and the conference room filled with the image of a massive space battle. The delegates around the table watched in fascination and horror as the final confrontation between humanity and the Devourers played out before them. This is Titan's Gate, Chen announced. 3 months ago, we finally found what we'd been hunting for 50 years, the Devourer's main construction facility. The display showed a structure that defied easy description. It was partly artificial and partly grown, like a metal tumor attached to a small moon. Ships moved in and out of its depths, like insects from a hive. Around it, hundreds of Devourer vessels formed protective formations. Intelligence suggested they were building a new type of ship here, Chen continued. Something bigger than anything they'd made before. Our scouts reported vessels nearly 50 miles long under construction. Counselor Mordak's rocky skin shifted to an even paler shade of gray. 50 miles? What could they possibly need ships that large for? Galactic conquest, Chen said simply. Not just consuming individual worlds, but entire sectors at once. These ships would have been mobile bases, capable of processing dozens of star systems simultaneously. She gestured, and the display zoomed in on the human fleet approaching the facility. Even to alien eyes, the ships looked impossibly fragile compared to their enemy. Patched hulls, mismatched components, engines trailing smoke and sparks. We had 733 ships for this attack, everything we had left. Cargo haulers converted to bombers, mining ships turned into fighters, passenger liners loaded with enough explosives to crack a moon. Ambassador Zeltar studied the tactical display with professional interest. Your formation is unusual, Admiral. Chen laughed, a sound without much humor. That's because it's not a formation at all. We'd learned that traditional military tactics didn't work against the Devourers. They could analyze and counter any organized strategy, so we didn't use one. The display showed the human ships spreading out in what looked like complete chaos. Some moved in small groups, others flew alone, all following seemingly random paths toward the Devourer facility. Each captain had general orders but complete tactical freedom. Attack whatever target looked most important, retreat when damaged, improvise constantly. The Devourers couldn't predict our movements because we weren't following any plan they could understand. Delegate Quilren ruffled his feathers nervously. But surely chaos leads to confusion among your own forces as well. It did, Chen admitted. We had collision accidents, friendly fire incidents, ships attacking the same targets while others went undefended. But the Devourers had worse problems. Their entire system was built on coordination and predictability. When faced with pure chaos, their response time slowed to almost nothing. The battle began to unfold on the display. The first wave of human ships reached the Devourer perimeter, and space erupted in weapons fire. But instead of the organized exchange of fire typical of galactic warfare, this looked more like a swarm of angry insects attacking a giant. The first ships through were all volunteers, Chen said quietly. They knew it was a suicide mission. Their job was to punch holes in the Devourer formation and cause as much confusion as possible. The aliens watched as tiny human ships rammed into vessels hundreds of times their size, exploding in brilliant flashes that left gaping wounds in the enemy formation. Captain Rodriguez there, Chen pointed to one particularly spectacular explosion, took his converted cargo ship straight into a Devourer battleship's main weapon array. He'd loaded his cargo bay with antimatter charges. The explosion took out 3 enemy ships. This is... Chrysalis paused, her crystal body flickering with distress. This is not warfare. This is mass suicide. Sometimes they're the same thing, Chen replied. We learned early that the Devourers couldn't process self-sacrifice as a tactical choice. They saw it as system malfunction, not strategy. The battle continued on the display. The second wave of human ships followed the first, but these moved differently. Instead of direct attacks, they began darting in and out of the Devourer formation, striking at specific targets. Wave 2 focused on their communication systems, Chen explained. We'd studied their technology for decades, learned their weaknesses, cut their communications, and individual Devourer ships couldn't coordinate with the main intelligence. You were isolating them, Zeltar observed. Exactly. Making them think as individuals instead of parts of a collective. And individual Devourer ships cut off from their network become much less dangerous. The display showed the Devourer formation beginning to fragment as communication links went dark. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination began to drift apart, responding to threats with increasing delay. That's when we sent in Wave 3, Chen continued. The display showed larger human ships, some of them clearly repurposed civilian vessels, approaching the construction facility itself. Our target wasn't really the defending fleet. It was that. She pointed to the massive structure at the center of the battle. Destroy their ability to build new ships and the Devourer threat would be crippled for centuries. But as the human ships approached the facility, the display showed new contacts appearing. Massive shapes emerged from the structure's depths, the new superships that had been under construction. They activated the incomplete vessels, Vexhai observed, her tentacles writhing with agitation. Even unfinished, they were enormous. Each one was the size of a small city, Chen confirmed. Their weapons could destroy our largest ships with single shots, but they had a weakness: they were unfinished. Their hulls were incomplete, their systems not fully integrated. The display showed what happened next. Instead of retreating from the massive enemy ships, the human vessels swarmed toward them like moths to flame. We went inside, Chen said, simply. Flew our ships right into their incomplete hulls and attacked them from within. They couldn't use their main weapons without destroying themselves. The aliens watched in amazement as human fighters and bombers disappeared into the gaps and openings of the massive Devourer ships. Explosions began to bloom from within the enemy vessels as the humans attacked critical systems from the inside. It was Commander Thompson's idea, Chen continued. He'd been a mining engineer before the war. He pointed out that the best way to demolish a large structure is from the inside, where you can target support beams and vital systems. One by one, the massive Devourer ships began to collapse from within, their superstructures failing as human bombs destroyed key components. But the battle was far from over. That's when their main intelligence made its mistake, Chen said, pointing to a new development on the display. The construction facility itself began to move, detaching from the moon and revealing itself to be a ship larger than anything else in the battle. It decided to engage directly rather than rely on its defenders. The Devourer command ship entered the battle personally. The vessel that emerged was beyond anything the Council delegates had imagined. It was the size of a small planet, its hull covered with weapons that could crack moons. When it fired, entire formations of human ships simply ceased to exist. How did you possibly defeat that? Asked Mordak, his voice barely above a whisper. Chen smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in the expression. With the most human tactic of all. My flagship, the Indomitable, was already damaged beyond repair. Life support failing, hull breached in a dozen places, engines held together with emergency welds. The display zoomed in on a single human ship, tiny compared to the enemy Leviathan, limping toward the Devourer command vessel on failing engines. I had a choice. Try to retreat and watch that thing hunt down the rest of my fleet, or... She paused, looking around the table. Or ram it, use my entire ship as a guided missile. You were willing to sacrifice yourself? Zeltar asked. I was willing to sacrifice my ship, Chen corrected. But not my crew. We had exactly 17 minutes to evacuate everyone to escape pods while maintaining the illusion that the Indomitable was still operational. The display showed the final moments of the battle. The battered human flagship, seemingly still under power, accelerated directly toward the massive Devourer command ship. At the last moment, escape pods ejected from its hull like seeds from a podon. The collision was spectacular. The Indomitable struck the enemy vessel at nearly the speed of light, its failing reactor detonating on impact. The explosion was visible from the edge of the solar system. The command ship's destruction sent a shutdown signal to every Devourer vessel in the fleet, Chen explained, as the display showed enemy ships going dark across the battlefield. Without their central intelligence, they reverted to dormant status. And that ended it? Asked Crystallis. That ended it, Chen confirmed. 50 years of war, millions of deaths, the near extinction of our species. It all came down to one crazy pilot willing to fly a broken ship into the enemy's heart. She looked around the table at the assembled delegates. We paid a price you can't imagine for this victory. But we paid it, and now the galaxy is safe from the Devourers. That's why we're here. Not to ask for help, but to take our place among the species that matter. The silence that followed was profound. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with heated discussion. For 3 hours the delegates had been debating humanity's request for membership, and the room was divided. Admiral Chen sat at a small table to one side, waiting patiently as 47 different species argued about her people's fate. The evidence is overwhelming, Ambassador Zeltar was saying. The battle recordings, the captured technology, the sensor data from multiple sources, all of it confirms Admiral Chen's account. Delegate Quilren stood, his feathers bristling with agitation. The evidence confirms that humans fought the Devourers, yes. But look at their methods. Suicide attacks, ramming maneuvers, using their own ships as weapons. These beings are too violent for civilized society. Too violent? Counselor Vexhi's tentacles writhed as she spoke. They saved us from the Devourers. Without their violence, we would all be dead. That's exactly the problem, interrupted Delegate Threshka, her insectoid features clicking with disapproval. They succeeded where the combined might of the galaxy failed. What does that say about our own military capabilities, our strategies, our leadership? Counselor Mordak's rocky skin had shifted to an embarrassed brown color. Perhaps it says we have grown too comfortable, too set in our ways. When was the last time any of us faced a true existential threat? The humans face every challenge, with extremes, argued Delegate Silmar, gesturing toward Chen. 50 years of constant warfare has shaped them into something unnatural. How can we integrate such beings into peaceful galactic society? Chen finally stood, her patience exhausted. With respect, Delegate Silmar, we didn't choose 50 years of war. It was forced on us. And now that it's over, all we want is a chance to rebuild our civilization in peace. Peace? Quilren laughed, harshly. Your entire culture is built around conflict. Your ships are weapons, your civilians are soldiers, your children grow up learning to fight. How do you expect us to trust that? Because, Chen said quietly, everything we fought for was the right to have peace. She walked to the center of the chamber, where the holographic display still showed the aftermath of the battle at Titan's Gate. With a gesture, she changed the image to show something different. Human refugee camps, families reuniting, children playing in the corridors of converted warships. Look at what we're actually doing now that the war is over. Building schools in our ships, setting up farms in cargo bays, teaching our children about art and music and literature instead of weapons and tactics. We're not warriors by choice, Delegate Quilren. We're survivors who had to become warriors. Ambassador Zeltar studied the images. What are your people's plans now, Admiral? Where will you go if the Council rejects your membership? Chen shrugged. We'll find empty systems, build new colonies, start over. We've done it before. But it would be easier with friends. The galaxy is a big place, and we've spent 50 years hiding in the dark corners of it. You speak of starting over, observed Crystallis, but your ships, your technology, your methods, they are all designed for war. How do you transition to peace? The same way anyone does, Chen replied. One day at a time. Our mining ships will go back to mining. Our transport vessels will carry families instead of soldiers. Our weapons will be dismantled or converted to tools. She gestured to the display again, showing human engineers working on damaged ships. Every person in our fleet knows how to fix things, build things, make things work with whatever materials are available. Those are exactly the skills needed for building a civilization. Delegate Threshka clicked her mandibles skeptically. And your military? What happens to all those fighters and soldiers? They become farmers, teachers, engineers, parents, Chen said simply. Most of them never wanted to be soldiers in the first place. They'll be happy to put down their weapons and pick up normal lives. But they'll remember how to fight, Quilren insisted. When the next crisis comes, they'll revert to violence. Yes, Chen agreed. They'll remember. And when the next impossible threat emerges, because there's always another one, they'll be ready to defend not just humanity, but all of galactic civilization. Isn't that exactly what you want in an ally? This brought another round of heated discussion. Some delegates nodded in agreement while others looked uncomfortable with the idea of humanity as the galaxy's military reserve. Counselor Vexhai raised a tentacle for attention. I have a question for Admiral Chen. Your people have suffered greatly. Many of your worlds were destroyed, your population reduced by billions. Surely you harbor resentment toward the galaxy that did nothing to help you? Chen considered the question carefully. We're angry, yes. Angry at the Devourers, angry at circumstances, angry at the universe for putting us in that situation, but we're not angry at you. Why not? Asked Mordak. We failed to detect the threat, failed to help when you needed it most. Because you didn't know, Chen said. How could you help with something you didn't know existed? Besides, we've learned something important over the past 50 years. Resentment is a luxury we can't afford. It takes energy to hate, and we need all our energy for building the future. She looked around the room, meeting each delegate's gaze. We're not asking to join the council because we think you owe us something. We're asking because we believe we can contribute something. We've learned to solve impossible problems, to adapt to any situation, to never give up no matter how bad things look. And if we say no? Asked Silmar. Then we say goodbye and good luck, Chen replied. We'll remember that when the galaxy was safe, we offered to share what we'd learned and you weren't interested. We'll hope that when the next crisis comes, and it will come, you're ready to handle it on your own. The chamber fell silent. The implicit warning in Chen's words was clear. They had proven that the impossible could happen, that threats the galaxy considered mythical could be very real indeed. Ambassador Zeltar stood slowly. Council members, I call for a formal vote on humanity's application for membership. All in favor? One by one, hands and tentacles and appendages rose around the chamber. Zeltar himself voted yes. Vexhai's tentacles curled in agreement. Mordak raised a rocky arm. Even some of the delegates who had argued against humanity, Crystallis, Threshka, others, slowly raised their own votes in favor. Only Quilren and 3 others abstained, their feathers ruffled with disapproval but unwilling to vote against. The motion carries, Zeltar announced. By unanimous consent of all voting members, humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a weight she had carried for 50 years finally lift from her shoulders. When she opened them again, she was smiling, the first genuine smile she had worn in decades. Thank you, she said simply. We won't disappoint you. I believe that, Zeltar replied. But I have one question, Admiral. What will humanity do now? You've spent 50 years at war. How will you adapt to peace? Chen looked out through the chamber's great windows at the pristine ships of the Galactic Fleet, then at her own battered vessels docked nearby. Her ships were ugly, patched, held together with desperate ingenuity and stubborn will, but they were still here, still flying, still carrying the dreams of a species that had refused to die. We'll do what humans have always done, she said. We'll adapt. We'll learn. We'll build something better from whatever pieces we can find. She paused, still looking at her ships. And we'll remember that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that look impossible until you win them. The formal ceremony that followed was brief but meaningful. Chen signed documents written in 17 different languages, shook hands or tentacles or claws with dozens of beings, and accepted the official welcome of the Galactic Council. But the moment that mattered most came afterward, when she walked back through the docking bay toward her flagship. The Indomitable's replacement was another patched, scarred vessel, a former cargo ship that had been converted to a command cruiser, sometime during the war. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals, its engines leaked coolant, and its communications array was held in place with magnetic clamps. It was beautiful. As she climbed the ramp to her ship, Chen could hear the sounds of her crew preparing for departure, human voices speaking in the relaxed tones of people who no longer expected to die at any moment. Children's laughter from the civilian quarters, the gentle hum of machinery that was finally being used for living instead of fighting. Behind her, the sleek ships of the Galactic Council waited in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like jewelry against the stars. They represented thousands of years of civilization, peace, and prosperity. Ahead of her, the human fleet prepared to depart for the first time as members of that civilization, rather than desperate refugees hiding in its shadows. Admiral Sarah Chen, the woman who had led humanity through its darkest hour and into its brightest future, walked onto her ship and prepared to take her people home.